This episode, we're joined by Will. Hi, Will.
Hello.
I want to tell you a story as to why you're on here.
I love stories. Tell away.
I was going for a run, believe it or not.
Oh, yeah.
And the issue that I had, I would always listen to a podcast. I try and make it about 20 to 30 minute podcast or 2 7-minute podcasts. And so that I can squeeze it in within the half an hour. I try not to exercise more than half an hour. And then I listen to the podcast. I was stumbling across. I always listen to loads, whether it's a part of the HubSpot network, some of our other episodes as well. So it's good to listen to your own voice ish. However, I put on a podcast the other day and it was like they'd stuck the microphone inside a tin can and shoved that tin can down the bottom of a mine shaft and then started shouting down the mine shaft to go, try and give me hints and tips on how to do it. It was a marketing podcast, like how to do this. And I instantly judged that negatively, thinking, how can you be running a podcast and it's so fucking harsh on your ears? What do you do?
Well, let's find out.
Welcome to Viral Recruiters, where we help recruiters, directors, owners, and marketers with their marketing. Everything that we talk about should bring in more candidates, more clients, more consultants, and everything that a recruitment agency needs. I'm Gibbard, founder of Recbound. Hope you enjoy the show.
I'm just going to keep going. So it's like following on from what you said there, you've touched on basically like the fundamentals of any kind of podcasting format, which is that your ears will get offended much more fast than your eyes will. So it's like, even if you were bringing like a visual component to your podcast, you should be absolutely making sure that above all else, it sounds good first, because people don't really want to listen to a disgustingly overly compressed Zoom recording for too long because it's just unpleasant to listen to. So you're absolutely onto something there.
So if you've got, so a lot of our clients and a lot of recruiters out there will be talking about putting a podcast together, or they might have one, or they will be wanting to put one together.
Yeah.
If it's from a setup where they're doing it either from their office or from a certain booth.
Yeah. I mean, you have to work with what you've got. So like, obviously you need to give a certain amount of leeway to people. Not everyone is a professional audio engineer, and not everyone even does that as like a bit of a hobby. So most people will be working with, at best, like a headset microphone, or at worst, they're just using the laptop audio and they've got a pair of earbuds in. So it's best not to like judge too harshly, but I think if you are serious about kind of podcasting and you think this is something that I would want people to listen to consistently, it's always worth doing a little bit of research and discovering what kind of microphones should you be using, how much money could you for me actually, it's like, what's the bare minimum you can invest to get it sounding actually just decent, because even decent is better than Zoom audio. If you know what I mean, you can get a fairly decent USB microphone for recording your voice in a podcast for up to 50 quid. And that's just on the low end before you even start looking at all the fancy crap that I bring in to record our stuff.
So all this fancy crap that you got here. Okay. So what's that mic that you're speaking into now then?
This is the SEX1S. And it's a condenser microphone, which means it's extremely sensitive. So it's good if you are someone who talks quite quietly by default, or if you just don't want to have to sit right in front of the grill holding it. The only issue is it does pick up everything, which means if there's people with particularly stompy boots in the hallway walking down outside, or the loudest recruiter you've ever heard in your life on a phone call in the hallway immediately outside your office, it will probably hear that. Which is why the microphone you're using right now, which is a Sennheiser E835, which is a dynamic microphone, is a little bit better for stuff like this, because it doesn't pick things up that aren't super close to it. So you have to hold it quite close to the noise source for it to pick anything up.
The noise source being my mouth?
Yes.
Right, okay,
yes,
cool.
Your voice. So, I mean, obviously that's all kind of a bit of disjointed rambling, but I'll tie that back to, you have to figure out what environment you're recording in to figure out what's best for you. You know, it's like, are you in a home office where maybe you don't get interrupted that often? Maybe a condenser is the right choice for you. And there you've got a room that's quite nicely treated. It doesn't have a lot of windows or glass in it, so you're not getting a lot of echoes or anything like that. Dynamics, if you're in a bit more of a noisy environment because they don't pick things up that are really far away from them, that might be a better shout for you because you can just sit down in a room that's maybe not super well treated, but is quiet enough, and the microphone will only pick up what's coming out really close to it.
Okay, very good. So I've got a dynamic microphone.
Yeah.
You've got a condenser microphone.
Yes.
So a lot of questions we have, because you're here with sound engineering, all the gear. You've obviously done a degree in this, so you know exactly what it is that you're talking about.
I mean, I like to think so.
It's certainly, you've got all the gear, so we hope you've got an idea. A lot of recruiters, they won't have any of this stuff. So
no.
What about, USB options? Is there a big difference in quality when it comes to USB?
I would say the difference is probably negligible. Most people are going to be listening on AirPods, cheap headphones, possibly even on like a phone speaker while they're like just making tea or out and about doing stuff, something like that. So the difference is negligible if you aren't trained to listen for it. So don't let a bunch of overly obsessive audiophiles tell you that you need to buy a £300 mic right off the bat. A good USB alternative you can buy is the Snowball by Blue Yeti. Like that will sound perfectly fine if you're just getting started as with a podcast and you just want to get your voice sounding fairly clear, and it will sound totally fine. You don't need a whole lot of experience to use it. Just basic audio software like Audacity, plug the USB into your computer, and you're pretty much good to go.
So what happens, because quite often people will want to record a podcast, but they want to do it over Zoom, for example, take the recording and then you turn it into a video file as well. What happens when they want to record it over Zoom? How does that set up? Rather than using Audacity, how does that setup work with microphones?
So Zoom actually does, to my knowledge, and when I've used it certainly, does actually support using external microphones, external audio interfaces. So that'll cover your side of things pretty much easily. You know, you can use a microphone with Zoom. It really just depends on what the person on the other end has got going on. What you can suggest from the person on the other end is that they record their end of the conversation, so you get the direct microphone from their end as opposed to just recording it from the Zoom call on your end. But software you can use with microphones, you can use things like OBS, which is an open source piece of software which lets you record microphone inputs and computer inputs at the same time. So you can get Zoom calls and your microphone audio captured separately. So you can then mix them to be louder or quieter than each other at a later stage, which is super useful if you want it to sound good.
Very good. So I think what you're saying is that if you're recording a podcast, but you want to make it higher quality, get in contact with Will because...
Yeah, basically. I have tips and tricks that I can offer pretty much anybody. You know, I'm always down to chat about anything audio related. It's definitely one of my, I guess you could call hyperfixations. So I very much enjoy talking audio with folks.
Very good. Any other hints and tips?
Yeah, basically the whole thing is just, I think it's less a tip and more just an overall ethos is if you record it and it sounds like shit, the final product's going to come out sounding like shit. You know, the whole thing of like, you can't polish a turd. So
speaking of polishing a turd, it's funny because we've just started this and we've done a fair few episodes and we've got a fair few episodes lined up. The very first time I heard this and you hear your own voice and it's, I can hear myself think, it's disgusting, and I hear myself talk, awful.
Yeah.
Any advice for people who have got that bit of a fear of putting themselves out there, having conversations?
Yeah, hearing your own voice coming back through the speakers for the first time is possibly one of the most disarming experiences of doing a podcast or any kind of recording your own voice, because basically, you know, you're used to hearing your own voice from essentially inside your own head. You hear your own voice traveling through internal pathways in your skull, which makes it sound more resonant and rich and deep. And then you hear it coming back through the speakers and you think, that's not me. My voice isn't that thin.
I thought I was
in real life.
A 7-year-old girl when I was speaking. And then, you know.
It's because when your voice comes back through the speakers, it's having to travel through the air first before it reaches your ears. So unfortunately, that is how you probably sound to most people in your life.
I did not need to hear that, but thank you.
You don't sound like a 7-year-old girl. That's just nerves. But the thing to remember as well is, like, if you are self-conscious about your own voice, people probably wouldn't want to talk to you if you sounded half as annoying as you think you do when you hear your own voice. So it's nothing to worry about. And annoyingly, the only way to really get over it is just to keep recording your own voice and getting used to how you sound coming back through playback, because it takes a bit of time getting used to, but eventually with enough tries, you'll just be like, oh yeah, that's my voice. That's basically what I sound like. Yeah.
Basically what you're saying is deal with it, you get used to it, and just keep going.
Yeah, just know that everyone is dealing with the same thing of like, oh wow, my voice sounds so bad when it comes back through recordings, but no one else is really thinking that about your voice on this particular recording. Only you're thinking that. So
very good. Good hints.
I try my best.
So there you go. If you are looking for help with the audio side of your podcast, I'm very fortunate that Will works here. If you are looking for help, any other hints, tips, or anything like that, certainly from the audio side of podcasts, get in contact with us today.
Yep, give us a shout.